welcome to this second Planning Committee of April. Can I take the apologies for absence, please?
Yes, I've got apologies for absence from Councillor Carr, Councillor Crozer, and Councillor Sands is subbing for Councillor Crozer, Councillor Lamas, Councillor Prenter, Councillor Chrissy Stamp, and I was going to have Councillor Price subbing for Chrissy Stamp, but not yet. I think that's it.
Thank you. As far as urgent matters are concerned, can I ask members to draw their attention to the supplementary agenda and ask you to note the additional conditions or amended conditions that were associated with items that were discussed on that evening. There are no minutes for this meeting, so are there any declarations? No? Okay, then we go straight on to the planning application for Aburound House, Woodlands Road. I think that's you.
Chairman, thank you very much. One thing I forgot to mention, members, at the last meeting, you were aware that the highways officer wasn't here, and there's no highways officer here today. I thought he just got caught in traffic. I've since found out that Melvin was rushed to hospital with appendicitis, so he's still recuperating at the moment. I was asked by the consultants whether we wanted a substitute to come to this meeting. Looking at the agenda, members, I felt we didn't need a substitute from Highways, so that's why there's no one here from Highways, if that's okay. Chairman, thank you very much. So the first application on the agenda is for Aburound House. This is an application submitted by, on behalf of the council, the HRA Housing Services. So it's for an affordable housing scheme on a brownfield site in Woodlands Road. So this is the application site just here. You have Woodlands Road coming down there. Opposite, you've got the doctor's surgery and the open space on this side. And then you've got Woodlands School just down here, and that's where Aburound House used to be. BT Avenue is at a higher land on the ground to the rear of the site. So some photographs looking towards this, down Woodlands Road towards the site. You can see BT Avenue behind it, just there. So this is the application site. And again, slightly further away, BT Avenue there. Closer up, BT Avenue just there. And then this is within the site, so you can start to see the difference in land level looking up to BT Avenue. And then the existing and the proposed access looking across the road towards the surgery. And then this is looking across Woodlands at the existing and proposed access. So looking up and down the road, you've got the surgery in there, the school here, and the school there. So this is, and that's the adjacent building on Woodlands Road. So you get an idea as to what is in the street scene with the two-storey opposite there. Aerial photograph of the site showing that relationship with those adjacent properties. Residential here, residential there, school further up here, doctor's surgery in here. So what's proposed, members, and you'll be familiar with this because you had a presentation from the HRA team on this. It's removing the existing building, utilising existing access coming into the site to a car parking area in here, and then constructing 2 blocks, 3-storey units on the site in here to provide for 18 apartments with landscaping and a bike bin store just in there. Then members, you did raise concerns at the presentation regarding the height of this block, which was at 4 stories at the time that you originally saw it, and also in terms of the internal arrangements and the proximity to those properties in BT Avenue. So the application has been amended. It's now for 3-storey, and I will talk through the internal layout, which shows how they have reflected your concerns there. So if we look at so we've got 2 blocks. If I go back, that's block A, block B just there, and that's the entrance to the units here and here. So you've got the block A, ground floor here, entrance to the units just there. You can see it's an interesting layout, brick design, going up over 3 levels, and then within the roof, providing for photovoltaic on the roof as part of that energy efficiency that members asked for as part of this proposal. Then going through to block B, you've got the entrance in here. Now this is the elevation here and here and here, where members were expressing some concern and asked for consideration to be given to how the internal layout to remove or limit overlooking of the adjacent properties. Now there is no overlooking at ground floor because of the change of land levels. So it's really at first floor and at second floor that the issues could potentially arise. And what they've done is they've arranged the internal layout. So if we look at flat 4 there, the main window is facing frontwards. It has 2 additional windows in there to the side, but these can be obscure glazed because they're not the primary window. They're secondary windows into that. Got the stairwell. That window in there can be obscure glazed. Flat 6, again, the main window in there looking to the rear of the site. These 2 windows can be obscure glazed. I'll come back to this one, and similarly on the second floor. So the 2 windows that they need to address here are this one and this one here, which serve the bedrooms 1 of flat 6 and flat 9. And what they can do, and there's a condition reflecting this, is to have a window that's designed so that there is the outlook is this way. So it'd be a way of limiting the outlook, and there is a condition which will require that amendment to the plans to reflect that. Then in terms of the height and the outlook from BT Avenue, because of the removal of that additional floor, that 4th floor level, and the change in height, the outlook from BT Avenue will be that of a 2-storey property rather than 3-storey. So they have really listened and reflected the concerns that members have, and that's that. As I was saying, that separation there, and what you can see is effectively a 2-storey, but with a flat roof with those photovoltaics within the roof space. And some cross sections through the site, and then some CGIs showing the brick design and that change in the walls, that curvature, to give some interest to the properties. Final materials will be down to a condition, and it will show that it can be well landscaped to the front to really settle in within the street scene, the car parking very much to the rear. So this will provide 18 very much needed affordable homes. That reduction in the number of units of the site and the changes that we have required and that members have required, and the fact that this is a brownfield site where there are additional costs mean that they cannot meet the normal Section 106 contributions. So there has been a viability assessment. We have received that response. It's been independently assessed. What that reveals is that this can deliver the 18 affordable units, and it can deliver a Section 106 contribution of £20,000. You will see on page 33 that the requests significantly exceed £20,000. So what I've done in the recommendation, their recommendation B, is to look at those ones which together come to that figure of around about £20,000. So I'm recommending that we get those contributions. That doesn't provide for anything for open space. There is this the open space opposite. It doesn't get anything for education, and it doesn't get anything for primary care, and there is the surgery opposite. Members, if you disagree with how put the contributions towards, that's fine. I'm happy for that to be realigned, providing it doesn't exceed £20,000, because if it does, the scheme simply is not viable and we won't get 18 affordable units on the site. The final thing that members need to be aware of is that there is still one issue that I need to resolve, and that relates to ecology. I don't think that will affect the principle of the development. There's been some initial consultation. We got some comments back from KCC Ecology. We've got some additional information from the applicants. That's currently with KCC Ecology. So what I'm asking members to do, if they're happy with the scheme, to grant approval subject to Section 106, conditions are set out, but also for me to add any conditions that might be asked for by KCC biodiversity. If, however, KCC do come back and raise fundamental issues, I will bring the application back to committee. And subject to that, members recommending approval. Thank you.
Councillor Trento.
Thank you, Dave, for that. And I have no major issues with this application personally. A couple of smaller points. First of all, regarding the Section 106, and understand what you're saying there, but in my view, when we're in a situation where the contributions are much smaller than we would like, for the reasons you outlined, I believe how they're used is even more important. And I would like to suggest that that ward councillors, presumably after May, that are involved with this are very carefully consulted, because it may well be that, you know, the odd £4,000 or £5,000 here or there within the close proximity of this development might offset some of the, you know, if you like, the impact on the neighbourhood more effectively than some of the areas such as, you know, to support a new, you know, major facility somewhere else. It's like a drop in the ocean. I don't think it will have much impact. So, and I say that mainly because it is a relatively small sum, you know, and it could easily just be lost somewhere. So please, could those ward councillors be consulted? The other thing is, I'm always slightly concerned, but I fully understand why the materials that are selected are a condition, because obviously officers will be looking at that very closely. I have seen, after a few years' experience on this committee, when something's completed, that there's a feeling of disappointment sometimes when you look at something and think, oh my goodness, why on earth did they choose that colour? I don't have an answer to this, but I just want to express disappointment that this committee doesn't have more of an input to some of those issues. I mean, obviously the colour on that CGI is, you know, just a colour. I've no idea. I don't know if you've got any more information on what may or may not be acceptable. And I don't even know how we can usefully contribute to that decision, because we're going to have to leave it to your officers, who, I'm not saying I don't trust them, but, you know, it's really, that it is so important, and it could go horribly wrong if the wrong decision is made. Again, I would suggest the ward councillors keep a close eye on those conditions and perhaps, you know, have a chat with your officers when they're making those decisions. More comments than anything. I don't know if you can come back on that or not. Thank you.
Councillor Curry.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Dave, for the presentation. I think, again, echoing what Councillor Trans said, I think this is a really good scheme now, and quite happy to support it. A couple of issues. I agree with the idea of the ward councillors' engagement, and perhaps if the final decision on the distribution of Section 106 funding is subject to that discussion. I don't know if that's possible for the committee to say, but that would be quite a useful input there, I feel. Just on the ecology issue, you've got conditions 18 and 19 dealing with the landscaping, and I just wondered if it was possible to specify there that native and local trees be used in the planting schemes. That may well keep Kent biodiversity team happy, and perhaps the installation of bird, like swallow nesting and bee solitary bee holes and things like that could be incorporated as well, and that may well go some way towards keeping them happy with it. And I know it's probably bats that they're worried about more, but if it's native trees and there's provision for that sort of thing within the structure, I think they should be quite happy. So that's one point on those conditions, whether we can include that in them. And then the other question is, and I appreciate a lot of effort's gone into the climate change issue here in respect to the solar panels. And latest solar panels, I know somebody installed some last year and their bills have fallen to about £2 a month as having the panels on their roof. So they're really quite valuable, not just for the climate, but also for the residents, indeed. So they've got much cheaper bills to pay. But I just wondered if you'd looked at having ground source or air source heat pumps involved here. I know you've got combi gas boilers going in that are very efficient, but I wondered if that had been looked at or whether it was just excluded on cost or whatever. So that's my question, really. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Potter.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm very happy to support this application. I think it's a good use of the land. I think it's a well-conceived, well-designed scheme. It's good layout, and the buildings themselves, I think, look tidy. I appreciate Councillor Tranter's concern with regard to the final materials that are used, and hopefully we will get something that looks very much like what we see in the CGIs in front of us here. In terms of the S106 contributions, do I understand that because it's a council house application, that's taken into account as part of that S106 assessment? It's done slightly differently to a commercial application. I'll let Dave come back on that in a moment, because I've got one other question as well, which is with regard to the landscaping. So we see mature trees here. There's a lot of mature trees on the site at the moment. Are those trees that are being saved, or are they trees that will be planted and will take a good number of years to look like that? Because I do hope that where mature trees can be saved, that they are saved. Again, there's the climate benefit of that, as well as the aesthetic aspect. Thank you.
Chairman, thank you very much. Going through those comments, very, very happy to involve ward councillors in the section 106 and the final assessment of that and where it goes. In relation to materials, on prominent sites like this, materials and detailing are absolutely critical. And I think my team does a really good job in terms of getting those materials right in a lot of cases. When I go around the area, and we review development sites every single year. So those sites that are finished, we go back to look at them, and we look at materials, we look at landscaping, we look at the design, see what we can learn, what we should do more of, what materials work well, what materials don't work, what materials we shouldn't use again. We similarly do that with members as well. Members, you know, we do that review of development sites with yourselves every year, and we learn lessons from that. So 100% agree with Councillor Tranter that materials are absolutely critical. In relation to Councillor Curry's point, what I'll do, Councillor Curry, if the ecology people come back with conditions and no fundamental problems, then I'll look at those conditions and see how they can be tweaked and worded to reflect the valuable comments that you've made here. On the ground source heat pumps, the housing team have looked at all the energy. They look very carefully at all the energy efficiency issues. I'm sure they have looked at the possibility of ground source heat pumps, but I'm happy to go back to them and ask that question again. In relation to trees, Councillor Potter, yes, where it's possible to retain trees, we will do so. And where it's not, they'll be removed. But as you've seen from this, there is a significant amount of additional planting that will go in here. And my team, my landscape officer and my tree officer will be looking very carefully at the type of trees that will go in there. And then the final bit in terms of affordable, yes, as with all schemes, I've put our housing team through a viability assessment that I would do with any developer. But the fact that this is provision of affordable homes is factored into what can then be provided in relation to Section 106.
I don't have anybody else who's indicated. just to say that it is very interesting how this scheme has actually evolved over time, and it is really much improved to where we started. I just also want to comment that during the life of this particular session of council, it's interesting to note that this committee has granted approval for the properties at Woodchurch Crescent, which look really great, for the houses in East Court Lane, for a site just a little bit north of this. So a lot of good work has gone in by the housing team, and a lot of good work has gone in by members in approving the schemes. I don't have anybody else who's indicated, so I go to the Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Colleagues, agenda item 4, Woodlands Road. I move recommendations subject to A, B and C, respectively. That is the awaited comments, if any, from KCC Biodiversity, and in that respect delegated authority to the head of planning for any additional conditions which might be considered appropriate after any representations. Secondly, the 106 agreement with the terms set out there, but subject to consultation with the ward councillors in that respect. And thirdly, the conditions 1 to 27, therein taking into account the helpful remarks from Councillor Curry, which Head of Planning indicated could be absorbed into those or additional to those conditions. So on that basis, Madam Chairman, I move approval.
Is that seconded? Thank you, Councillor Thorne. Those in favour?
That's 13, Chairman.
Thank you. The application for Aburound House, Woodlands Road is approved. So that takes us to 100 King George's Road, Wheatswood. Mr Harris.
Chairman, thank you very much. This is an application for the construction of a part 2-storey side and part single-storey side and rear extension, a dormitory to the rear, together with a porch and roof lights to the front. As you'll see from the application, it has been amended during its lifetime from a scheme that residents, the councillor who's commented, and officers considered to be unacceptable, and it's been significantly amended to a scheme that we now consider to be one which is appropriate for the street scene and this property. So this is the property here, end of terrace, and this is it just in here. So you can see how it relates to the street scene. You can see what has been extended next door, and then an example of what has happened elsewhere in the street scene in that one. So existing block plan, proposed block plans showing that the rear extension and the side extension in there. Existing footprints, and you note this is the front of the property just here. So the entrance, ground floor, this is the first floor, so you'll have seen in the photographs that slight setback at first floor there. So you'll notice the changes as we go through. And this is the revised scheme in terms of floor area. So it's a 2-storey side extension, set back very slightly by about 500 from the front there to provide that interest. But you've also got that infill there at first floor as well. Then to the rear, you've got this single-storey rear extension running the full width, which is going to be flat roof, but with this lantern roof light in there, providing for this extended dining and utility in WC. And then we have this porch at the front of the property there. Then we go up to the roof space, 2 roof lights in the front, at the front, the conversion of that roof space there to provide an additional bedroom, and that will be served by a dormer window, but just going the width that is there. So those are the existing elevations. And then this is the scheme which originally came to us. So you'll see that originally they were looking to go right the way to the front of the property, right up to the top of the ridge, and then to have a dormer the full width of the existing and the property and the extension as well. Now, we had concerns on that. We felt that although in the street scene, if I go back to the photograph just there, you'll see it has been done elsewhere in the street scene, but we didn't feel that that should be something that we wish to continue here. So we felt that there was a need to make the extension appear more subservient to the existing building. And then that dormer there we felt was too large, too dominant on the existing building and the character. So we asked them to remove that part of the dormer and then to set back the extension very slightly by about 500 mil, which then brings that roof line down a bit, makes the extension appear more subservient. So this is what we've achieved. So as you can see, taking the ridge down, setting it back so it reveals the existing property, although albeit with that little infill just in there. Slight setback, single-story extension, and then a much reduced dormer in there. We feel that greatly respects the character of the street scene, provides the additional accommodation that the applicants need, does not cause any unacceptable harm to the amenities of neighbours, doesn't provide for any additional overlooking that doesn't already exist, and the car parking that exists to the front of the property would be satisfactory to serve a property of this size, and we are therefore recommending approval, subject to the conditions as laid out. Thank you, Chairman.
Any member? No. Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you to Dave for the presentation. Colleagues, agenda item 5, 100 King George Road, Chatham. I move the recommendation that is of approval, subject to the terms of conditions 1 to 4 set out in the report. So moved.
Is that seconded? Thank you. Those in favour?
That's 13, Chairman.
The application for 100 King George's Road, Weedswood, is approved. So that completes the discussion on applications. And I then take you to agenda item 6, which is the performance report. So it's back to you.
Chairman, thank you very much for this. Members, I would normally have brought performance reports, as you know, every quarter to members. And I have attempted a number of times to bring the performance report to you, but it's always been on a packed agenda. And members, rightly, you've asked for the performance report to be deferred. So where we are now is I've got you a report here which covers that period from the 1st of July 2022 through to the 31st of March 2023. It's been, what I wanted to do is just set a little bit of the context and the scene, members. It's been a challenging year, and it's been a challenging year because of the resource issues that we've struggled with at Medway, which are consistent with the struggles of fellow authorities elsewhere in Kent, elsewhere in the southeast, but also nationally. There are real struggles for local authorities recruiting professional planners, but even other staff within the service. In terms of development management, you know that I've struggled to recruit at senior planner level. I've still got some vacancies there. Where I have had to recruit at senior level, I've had to replace very experienced senior planners with the promotion of more junior staff to senior level. They deserved it, but they obviously don't have the level of experience of the staff that they're replacing. What we are also very much trying to do is to grow our own, because there seems to be a dearth of experienced planners out in the market. Now, I'm talking to universities, I'm talking to Derelict about how that needs to be addressed going forward, but it's not going to be done in the short term. So we need to continue that growing our own. Those more junior staff need to be supported in that growth, because if they're not supported, then they similarly will leave. In the policy team, I've got a 25% short of the staff within that service. I've got 2 senior planner vacancies out to recruitment for them at the moment. No interest in that. And then I've got another senior planner who's off sick at the moment. In my tree team, as you know, I've got a senior tree officer who's had a lot of work taking up working on planning applications as a result of climate change and rightly the greater importance put on trees and landscaping in schemes. Also involved a significant amount in trying to get Innovation Park Medway correct. I have, thanks to this committee and their efforts, I've got a vacant tree officer post, which I need to recruit to. But in the meantime, we're employing a consultant to eat into some of that backlog that members have quite rightly pointed out. In relation to enforcement, there are 3 posts in my enforcement team. 2 of those posts are vacant. One of the assistant enforcement officer was successful to be promoted into one of the planner posts, deserved it, but that then creates a vacancy in the enforcement team. The enforcement officer did go off sick for a number of reasons, but then when she did return, she handed a notice and she left. So I've got those 2 vacancies. And members, although you see Alison with us tonight, you'll be aware that she'd also had a period off sick this year, caused as a direct result of a serious case that we were dealing with. So that's the context of the performance report that I'm going to present to you. So we are fortunate in that, despite those vacancies, planning application numbers have gone down slightly this year. If we had still been in that level that we saw last year or the year before, the team would have struggled even more than they have done. So planning application numbers going down slightly has helped us cope with the resource issues that we've faced. But in terms of performance, the team have done simply incredibly in terms of their performance. So the blue is the target, and you'll see over those months that you're considering, July, October, January, they've always matched or exceeded those targets in relation to applications within the statutory time period or applications which are subject to an extension of time. Now, extension of times you just can't impose on people. There's got to be a reason. You can't just say, I haven't had time to consider your application. There's got to be a reason for the delay, which is either it being referred to planning committee or that we're trying to negotiate a better scheme. And on that basis, we can then get an extension of time. In relation to minor applications, similarly, you can see that performance on all and every quarter has exceeded the target for both applications without extension of time and with an extension of time. And then for other applications, again, performance has been exceptional. Indeed, between October and December, for those with a planning extension agreement, it's 100% were determined within time. Planning fees, you'll know it's been a tough year. It's been a bit up and down. My budget was £1,500,000. The budget was given to me was based on our best ever year rather than an average over the 10 years. I understand why that happened, but it always meant that I was going to be struggling at some point in time to meet the budget target, particularly if the economy took a downturn slightly, which it has done this year. Notwithstanding that, as a result of my officers, myself, and you members working closely with the development industry, we've still got good applications in, significant applications in, which has meant that we've exceeded the £1 million mark in relation to income. We've also worked very closely, and again, members, you're involved in this in terms of planning performance agreements, which has brought in extra money towards staff resources. So this is our benchmarking. It's very important that we benchmark in all ways that we can with other authorities. Are we better than them? Are they doing something that we should be doing? So we do benchmark very carefully. And you can see here that just in terms of performance, we exceed other local planning authorities. And similarly with applications for an extension of time. Appeals, members, you do know the pressure that we're under in relation to appeals. These are the appeals that have come in. In addition to what this doesn't show is those which are written reps, those which are informal hearings, and those which are public inquiries. And members, you know from previous discussions with me, we've got, at the moment, 7 public inquiries just this year, possibly an 8th. We're 1 down at the moment, which was the winery. We've got another 2 next week, and then a 4th one towards the end of the month, beginning of May, and then 3, possibly 4 enforcement cases later in the year. In terms of performance, this shows a comparison of appeals allowed and appeals dismissed. And we do pretty well in terms of, you can see, appeals being dismissed. And then we have an informal target. It's not a government target, it's an informal target of no more than 30% of appeals allowed. The reason we have that target is because it gives an indication as to whether we're making decisions which are being backed up by an inspector. But it's not something that we're monitored on by government at all. It's something we monitor ourselves. And you can see that we've had some good quarters. We've had some other quarters where we haven't met that target. What I will do in the next bit, which is we will look at those ones that we've lost or where members have made a decision contrary to officers. And that's important because that will show, are we making decisions which have fundamentally not been agreed at appeal, or is it just those cases which are more balanced and inspectors have just balanced them slightly differently to us? Prior approvals. And then this is a number of units under construction. And members, you've had presentations from me on the housing delivery test, and et cetera, et cetera. What this shows is that since 2018, the number of dwellings under construction has significantly increased. And if you look at an 18-month, 2-year of construction, that number under construction will be reflected in terms of delivery probably 2 years later. Actually, it is reflected 2 years later. So if you look at those figures, you can see how many have been delivered in Medway. You just have to go around Medway, see the number of cranes up to see this. And this is the number of units completed. So you can see those 3 years there where we've been over 1,000 units for 3 years total. Our problem is the standard methodology and the figure that's our requirement currently there, and therefore our deficit. Enforcement, despite the pressures that the team have seen on them, you can see there in terms of enforcement notices served, Section 215 notices, which are mostly relate to Aaron and the Environmental Protection Team, and Section 330 notices, which are requisitions for information to help us when we do take formal action. And then this just shows the amount of enforcement complaints that the team are dealing with. Tree preservation order applications received and those determined. And really pleasing thing to note is that for the first time, we're seeing in the last quarter, 2 quarters, more being determined than are coming in. And that is through the use of the consultant that we've got. So it's costing us, but we're getting through that backlog now. And then also I'm responsible for the lead local flood authority who comment on various planning application matters. And I've got 1 officer there as the second post is vacant. Complaints and compliments. You've got a report in front of you which sets out the complaints that we've received, but also sets out the compliments that the team have received. And I've got to say, I was speaking to my service monitoring officer today, and she gave me a fact which I hadn't been aware of before, that we're actually got more compliments in through the quarter and the year than we have had complaints, which I think says a lot about the quality of the staff that I've got. Members, that takes me through the presentation. Thank you, Chairman.
Members. Councillor Hackwell.
Thank you, Chair. As you probably won't be surprised, Mr. Harris, I'm going to talk about the TPOs. First of all, I need to understand that graph, whether if you could just go back to it, because are the orange bars in addition to the blue bars, or are they a subset? So it's in addition. Okay. So I quickly did the maths, and I believe you've made 19 inroads, or 19 extra than you've received. So it's a very small proportion of the backlog, I would imagine. How big is the backlog?
As Sod's Law has it, that I haven't brought that email with me, but basically what we're doing with the consultant is we're asking her to go back and deal with some of the really old ones, but also those ones which have come in this year. She's got through all of the ones through 2020, 2021. She's nearly through 2022, and she's up to date with all the ones which are coming in 2023 at the moment. So it's significantly eaten into the backlog. What the graph doesn't show, Councillor Hackwell, are those ones which have been withdrawn.
It just seems to me that I should try to add the maths up into the graph, and it means that you've eaten 19 into the backlog, which is not very many. I made it that you had 236 in, and you out, and you 226 in. So 19 is not very many, is the point I'm trying to make.
Councillor Hubbard.
Can I thank Mr. Harris for the presentation, and can he pass on my thanks, and maybe hopefully the thanks of all the committee, for the hard work that his team is doing under difficult circumstances, and in the shortfall in staffing numbers as well. I was very grateful, in fact Sam and I were very grateful that you were able to come along to the Shadow Cabinet meeting and explain in detail the shortfall in staffing and your proposals as well. And whoever's there after the 8th of May, of course, I'm sure we'll be able to support you. And the thing is to make sure we have as much staff as possible, especially with the local plans coming in as well. So I'm sure that, I know that Simon will be there. I don't know who else will be, but I'm sure that you'll be our support to make sure that you have the staffing levels to deliver the service, because this is the frontline service where everybody sees, and not happening is incredibly poor. So yes, I express my thanks to all the current staff for the hard work they're doing. Thank you.
Councillor Tranton.
Thank you, Chair. I guess we all, from time to time, sort of give you a hard time in your team, Dave, in the nicest possible way, because we're all under pressure ourselves from residents and businesses to get answers for things. So really well done for what you have achieved, because I think everyone understands the resourcing issues that you face. A couple of little comments, really. One is I'm always intrigued to understand the implications of this committee overturning officers' recommendations. I think that's when we have to be very, very careful. And I know you give us a lot of guidance when we're in those situations, and sometimes a little sterner than others, and quite rightly so. I really think that is so important, because otherwise we could accidentally, because we're not the professionals here, incur huge expenses for residents if we get those decisions wrong. So I just I know that's a difficult part, because it is this committee which ultimately makes decisions on those that come before us. And I do hope you'll always continue to keep that pressure on us as well to make sound decisions, even though sometimes we may disagree with you. Understanding all of that is really, really important. The other little comment, I think, in my sort of 8 years of being on this particular committee, and I've learned a few things, I've still got masses more to learn, of course. I think the most important thing for us when we are explaining issues, I'm thinking about the complaints and so on, to anyone, whether it's a business or a resident, is that, how can I put this? People really fail to understand what this planning committee is about on occasions, and that we don't just have openness to do whatever we think we'd like to do. There are very, very strict rules and laws that we all have to apply. I think we could do better as an authority in the way that we explain how the planning decisions operate, whether that's something online or how we do that, I don't know. Because I often say to residents, the best I can do is give you an honest answer to something, even if it's not the answer you hoped for, but it will be honest and straightforward, because sometimes people will understand bad news if they can understand the rationale behind it. And I think planning for all of us, whether it's a member or an officer, it's so important that we are able to explain why things are the way they are. And I think we could do better at that. And I'm not directing at anyone in particular. I mean, I just think it's a general comment and something to work on in the future. But well done to the team. Thank you very much.
I feel that, that I should say for myself, I've always been very impressed in the way the planning department works, the way it's run, the dedication of its staff. Lots of people who've come and gone, and the thing that I'm always talking about is the growing our own, which has been extremely successful. There are huge challenges, not only for Medway, but in conversation with Dave, I understand that there's a national shortage of planners. So those difficulties are not going to be overcome overnight. But I have been very proud of what Medway has achieved and what members have learned over a period of time and what differences have occurred in these towns in the last 25 years. So I'll go to the Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Members, on this item 6, I would move that the report is noted and, if I may, to reflect colleagues' remarks, and that we formally record our thanks through the Head of Planning to all members of the team, all aspects of the planning work, enforcement, tree work, etc., that his team undertake, and as said, that we place on record our considerable thanks to all of them. So moved.
Councillor Thorne? Seconded. Thank you. Those in favour?
That's 13, Chairman.
Thank you. That report is approved. That takes us then to the appeal decisions.
Chairman, thank you very much. As I just alluded to, we have in the report said how many appeals that we've received and the outcomes of those. But in terms of this presentation and the main Appendix A, we're just looking at those appeals which have either been allowed or when members made a different decision to officers, so that we can think about those decisions. So the first one there is 2 appeals relating to chestnuts out at Mats Hill, and it was for a gypsy site. The inspector allowed the appeal, but only for effectively 2 mobile homes on the site. One a static, one a touring one, and then also with this utility block just in here. So this is some photographs of the site. So that's the static building, that's the utility building just in there. And there was, in the past, a second static caravan in there, which the inspector did not allow, and which had to be removed from the site. Then we get to 54 Grange Road. And this was for a change of use of a dwelling house to a Class 8 C4 HMO with a single-storey extension to the rear. So that's the property just in there. and to the rear, and this structure would be removed. So this is the existing floor plans here. So you can say already it was being laid out for an HMO. So you've got the living area on the ground floor there with one bedroom in here, go down to a basement with the kitchen serving them all there, but another unit in here. Go up to first floor, you've got another two units, and then up on the loft area there. And then the proposal was to have this extension out the back, and then to improve the amenity of the residents here, or prospective residents. We refused it under delegated powers. We were concerned in terms of its impact on neighbouring properties and neighbouring residents, but the inspector disagreed with us for the reasons that you see in the report. Then we get to 82 Jeffrey Street. This is, the chairman here will be aware of the extensive, decades-old history of permissions on this site for the old Wood Church. And this was to try and change a permission that exists. So it's demolition of existing buildings on the site, construction of a pair of two-bedroom detached bungalows, and one 2.5-storey block of flats. Now, the difference here from what was previously approved, that remains the same. The block of flats remains the same, but what the applicants were doing was to take, to go up into the roof space to provide for accommodation within the roof and provide these dormers. We refused under delegated powers. We felt that it was harmful in terms of living conditions of neighbouring properties with regard to privacy. The inspector considered it, but took the view that he felt that it wasn't introducing concerns over privacy that didn't already exist. Then we get to 1A Horsted Avenue, which is a property which is used as two flats, one at the first ground floor, one at the first floor. And the two gardens, front and back, are used by for the two flats. So the front garden is used for the first floor flat, and the rear garden for the ground floor flat. So this photograph gives an idea as to the concern that we had as officers. So that's the front garden, that's the current boundary treatment. But that garden serves the first floor flat come out of here. And what they wanted to do was to increase the height of the fencing that goes around there and to provide a cycle store in here. We looked at the street scene. We felt that this was okay in the street scene, but increase in the height of that fencing, putting a further building in the front garden would be out of character, would be harmful to the street scene. The inspector disagreed. So this is that front garden area. That's where the shed is to be sited. That's the front of the property, just here. That's the bike shed. And then that's the structure that was proposed around the outside. The inspector took the view that it was only a small increase over what currently existed, and the greater height was more trellis and therefore more open. So quite a balanced decision. 42 New Road members will be very familiar with this, which is the HMO here, and the concern about that second floor flat in there, whether that provided a sufficient level of amenity for the prospective occupier. Members didn't think it did. An inspector disagreed and felt that it did provide the necessary amenity for prospective occupiers. On to Watling Street. This is change of use from opticians to hot food takeaway. The concern that members had on this one was about the number of takeaways within the street scene and whether that harmed the character, the retail character and the vibrancy of that street. So members refused it. An inspector carefully looked at the arguments put forward by the applicants, carefully looked at the arguments put forward by members, and on balance came to a view which supported what the applicants had said and allowed the appeal. This one here is for is a prior approval, and members know This is a real bugbear of mine in terms of permitted development. So this is the Lloyd's building on Gillingham Business Park, and it's a permitted development, prior approval to convert this to residential. This is a building in the middle of an industrial estate, and surrounded by trees, and who knows who they're going to put in it, possibly some of the most vulnerable in our society, in the middle of an industrial estate. I'm getting on my high horse a little bit here because I think it's unacceptable, and the sooner this piece of legislation is changed, the better. And you can see the significant number of properties that they're looking to get in here. It is looking to provide 44 residential units in this block in the middle of an industrial estate. I'm sorry, I'm labouring the point because I really think this is a poor decision by an inspector, and it's a poor piece of legislation. We think that with all the trees around here, it would be a poor level of amenity for the prospective occupiers. We tried our best to find reasons to refuse this because it's not acceptable, but unfortunately we lost out. This is another case which members had concerns. These are garages at Barclays Mount. Outline application for some flats on here. Members, you just weren't convinced that this could on this site they could secure a satisfactory development which protected the amenity of residents that lived around there, provided for car parking, and provided an internal amenity. An inspector, based on very limited information, decided that this was outlined and that at reserve matters it was down to us to see if we could get a satisfactory scheme on here. Time will tell on that one. And then we get Bell Farmhouse, which is for the removal of these garages and the construction of a new garage. We considered it's refused under delegated powers. We considered that what was being proposed in terms of the size of the garage would be too prominent and out of character with the area. So that's what's there at the moment. That's what's proposed. If it's constructed of the right materials, it won't be too bad, but it is very large. And an inspector, on balance, took the view that it was acceptable. Then we get to another hot food takeaway in Chatham. Change of use from retail to hot food takeaway. We had concerns about highway safety. You can see where it's located. We all know that in terms of hot food takeaways, people do not necessarily follow parking restrictions. We felt that if they didn't follow parking restrictions, there would be some highway safety issues. An inspector disagreed with us. TPO application was for the removal of this tree here. An inspector took the view that he agreed with us that the tree should not be removed, but that it could be pruned. And then we get another hot food takeaway just in a change of use of butcher's shop. This is at Cuxton. And this was a delegated one. You can see from the report on page 84 that we were concerned about the living conditions of the people living above regarding noise and disturbance. We were also concerned regarding highway safety. An inspector considered that the noise and disturbance issues could be satisfactorily addressed by hours conditions, and also flue extraction could protect the amenities. He also felt that in terms of the highway safety and the car parking issues that existed in the area, that because the takeaway would be at different times, that it wouldn't be such a problem, and therefore he allowed the appeal. Then got on to Patman's Wharf. Again, this was a site that considered very carefully by members. So it's got Patman's Wharf here. Opposite is the old quarry, which was granted permission for residential development back in the late 1980s, early 1990s. That development has happened. It's a good development. The applicants first of all tried to argue that the yard was part of that permission, but we demonstrated that it wasn't. So this is the wharf just in here. Our concern there was not in terms of what the development was going to look like, but the fact that you've got GPS Marine just in here, which could be a noisy use. We went to informal hearing. The inspector accepted additional evidence at the, through the appeal process that wasn't presented to us at the time of processing the application. We considered that, and as a result of that additional evidence, the inspector allowed the appeal. He said that the satisfactory internal amenity could be secured here. And then we get on to the final one, which is outside our area, but is one which gives me huge concern. It's in Swale Borough, so you've got Lower Rainham Road coming along here, Ottram Quay going along there. So this part of the opposite is in Swale. This is the Woodies Orchard, which is in our area. And this is the road which goes towards Upchurch. That area in there currently is an agricultural field used for fruit production at the moment. We, having lost the appeal at Bakersfield, allowed development on this site in here in Woodies Orchard, on the basis that this wasn't an agricultural use. It was all as part of that old brickworks in there. We also allowed some development on the opposite side of Station Road up to Berengrave Nature Reserve, on the basis that that wasn't of high quality agricultural land. But we've always sought to protect any development north of the Lower Rainham Road towards the river. We defended a hard-fought public inquiry, as Councillor Potter knows, not that long ago on Pump Farm. We also felt that any development in here would create traffic issues on the A2, and I have to say that if there are traffic issues anywhere in Medway, they are on the A2 through Rainham. That's the worst road in terms of amount of traffic in Medway, and that includes air quality as well. So we joined with Swale Borough Council to try to fight off this application by Gladman's, and I'm still astonished how an inspector could allow this appeal. On highway grounds, on landscape grounds, on character grounds, everything. It's a bizarre decision in my view. He accepted that there was harm, but felt that the provision of housing outweighed that harm. That worries me greatly. I think this is akin to the East Hill decision. It's akin to the Gibraltar Farm decision. It just shows that until we get our local plan, I know that members have said this, until we get our local plan, we are going to be very vulnerable to such speculative decisions. I have asked our legal team our legal team and also our barrister who is working for us on Moore Street, whether we can challenge that decision. His response was that whilst he agreed that another inspector on another day would have made another decision, a different decision, the inspector had addressed all the points, so we couldn't argue that the decision was Wednesbury unreasonable or that he hadn't considered all the issues. It's just a very poor decision, unfortunately, for Medway. Sorry to end on that one, Chairman.
I think it's really very important that the committee does look at appeal decisions, because basically it helps you when you're looking at future applications. It also highlights for me how bizarre some inspectors actually come up with the responses that they do, because if you look at some of these in detail, I find it incredible that one person can completely go against what much more local and a significant number of people have actually looked at and come up with a very sound reasons for refusal. With regard to this particular site, I read the appeal decision right the way through, and I was very disappointed of the level of representation that Swale actually put into this, because in actual fact, I think they only sent a senior planner, and if you're going against Gladman's, you certainly need a lot more than just a planner. Councillor Tranter.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. Really interesting presentation and very helpful for us to learn from it. And with that in mind, a question how we learn from one which is the Patman's Wharf one. I mean, I was one of those that expressed real concerns about the noise from GPS next door, and particularly because, knowing the business, they could have a long period of time without making any noise, and they get a particular type of contract in, and then for months they could be making quite a din. Now, bearing in mind what's happened, if, you know, well, obviously when this goes ahead, this development, is it going to constrain GPS in any way in terms of the noise and so on that they're, you know, because they've done nothing wrong here. They've just carried on doing what they're doing, want to carry on running their business as they always have done. I'm just concerned about, you know, having raised all these noise issues, and then it gets, you know, so no, there isn't a noise issue. If there is a noise issue, I mean, perhaps this is a question for our environmental colleagues, but I'm intrigued to know where we stand, because we've been overruled, I think wrongly in this case. But what happens, you know, later? Does it have any impact? I don't know.
Chairman, that's a really, really good question. Very fortunately, the legislation has changed. So it used to be that if you brought it, a new development could come in and then complain about an existing development, and that could result in that development closing at times. That's happened in the past. Fortunately, the legislation has changed. So effectively, GPS Marine is there, and it's almost buyer beware. Now, we will, though, be looking very closely at the conditions in terms of what protection we can give to what we can build into those proposed properties to minimise that any noise disturbance.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm equally very concerned about the Osman Quarry Lane decision. Looks like Swell basically turned up undertooled and outgunned by Gladsman, who clearly, I think, they had a barrister and a transport planner, and Swell turned up without a transport planner, because our transport planner was in attendance. And of course, the result of this decision is the fact that the appeal, which is what, next week, you say? Yeah, that is the two appeal against two planning decisions we made. We've had to change, the council's had to change its position on advice from the barrister and the transport planner because we've been undermined. So effectively, Shippey have thrown us under a bus. And anyway, so yes, it's not a good decision, and it's actually made our other decision, which I thought was adequate, untenable. Can I just refer to the Lloyd's building group one? I travel past it quite often because I work on the Gillingham Business Park. I know it's permitted use, change of use, but it's the fact that that site is surrounded by woodland as well, and it may set a precedent for other locations on the Gillingham Business Park being brought forward for potential housing. I can mention one of them, and I actually work there because it's surrounded on more than 2/3 of the site by Academy Drive, and I'm quite sure that it may well at some point be a planning application to see if they can change it, because, you know, that's what I do if I own the site. And by the way, it's the site we went to many years ago when I took my son in a carry-cot to a site meeting there, because it's when I started working at that site, I thought I've been here before, but I can't remember when. In fact, it was when they gave permission for what is now the Top Shop, as I call it. So it's very worrying, the fact that, you know, what is the business park could start to become some housing elements without us really having any control over it. Thank you.
Councillor Hackwell and then Councillor Potter.
Thank you, Chair. My question is a bit more around enforcement. I'm referring to when we lose an appeal and permission is given, for example, at the Chestnuts, and they put more than 2 caravans on it. They get rid of the laurel hedge and put a fence up. You know, have we got any comeback on the inspectors? Because we wouldn't have allowed it at all. It's been allowed, and now they're not actually meeting what was agreed.
Chairman, I would love to bring some inspectors back down with a scruff of the neck and show them certain sites, and possibly including this one. In answer to your question, Councillor Hackwell, we've opened a new enforcement case on this, so we're back to square one in dealing with that case, separate to this appeal.
Councillor Potter.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We're just starting with the former Lloyds Banking Group building. I had a friend, I still have a friend, but she used to work there, and I don't think she could ever conceive that would be used for residential purposes. There is zero outlook on one side of the building. It's at the far end of an industrial park as such. And yeah, it's very frustrating that legislation has been used for a purpose it was not intended, in order to put forward what would seem to be some form of supported or not particularly well supported accommodation by nature of its location. But so our hands are tied on that one, and I appreciate that the council and the work of officers in terms of trying to do all they can with that. And then finally, turning to Raynham and then to the Oxram Key Lane decision, incredibly frustrating that the inspector made the decision that he made. I'm also very disappointed in the representation by Swell. I appreciate I think we went above and beyond in terms of what we put forward as a neighbouring authority, but this was a site in Swell, and they, in my view, should have put together a proper legal team and with top witnesses specialising in the various different areas, whether it's highways, whether it's agriculture, whether it's landscape, just like we did with Pump and Blaw's Farm and we've done elsewhere. And to think of the amount of money that we've put into fighting those appeals and winning those appeals, and you know, just as the local councillor, you know, the effort that I've put in to raising the concerns around these issues and lobbying on these issues, and many in the community joining me in that, to see that potentially that's been jeopardised by what's happened here. So I'm annoyed with the inspector, but I'm also frustrated with and annoyed with Swell on this one as well. But we are where we are, and we'll see what the future holds. And although I won't be on the council, I shall still be a resident of Raynham, and I shall still be making the case for limiting development in those areas. Thank you.
A bit of history on Gillingham Business Park, because it has suffered more than once at the hands of an inspector, because the original concept for Gillingham Business Park was that it would have no retail on it. And in fact, there was no retail on it for a considerable period of time. And then we lost one appeal, which has led to the out-of-town shopping which has occurred on the corner, on the roundabout. None of that should have ever been there. There was never an intention that it would have retail facilities on it. It was purely a business park. There we are. Much water under the bridge. So, having accepted all of that information, we then move on to the 106, yes? Yeah, if you'd like to note the...
Madam Chairman, members, agenda item 7, I move that the report be noted.
Seconded? Agreed? Thank you. Right. 106.
Chairman, the report is there before you in terms of section 106s and the various appendices. I'm happy to take questions. I'd prefer if they were to come via email to myself and Jill King, and we'll get comprehensive responses to them. Thank you, Chairman.
Do members have any Questions? No? Vice Chairman.
Note the report on section 106, Madam Chair.
Agreed? Thank you. So, if you could move.
Members, item number 9, I move exclusion of the press and public for the reasons set out within Mr Gill's report.
Seconded? Thank you.